All right, it is Thursday, September 14th, 2023, and you are watching the MMA Eco Live podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Chris Bresnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem and host of this podcast. I have worked as an MMA manager, worked for Tapology, doing a lot of stuff with Fighter Records, and worked in MMA media for just over 2 years now. That little intro, in case it's your first time on the podcast, been getting more and more new watchers, listeners, and yeah, glad you're here. If you have not, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Would really appreciate that if you enjoy the podcast. But today, what we will do is go through this weekend's Asian MMA schedule, and after that, go through your questions. If you have any questions related to Asian MMA or anything else under the sun, go ahead and drop those in the chat and I will get to those. And watch out, we've got some moderators on action today, so appreciate their help as usual. But yeah, let's get into it. Oh, and there's a couple news items that I'll discuss later after I go through the schedule. One thing I am really happy about is that the battery problems the last 3 weeks, fixed those. So that's great news. Yeah, that was a frustrating saga, but finally got that figured out. So smooth sailing today. All right, so let's first get into WLF MMA. So they've got a show going down tomorrow. For me on the Pacific Coast, it actually starts at 11 p.m. tonight. But WLF has one of their country versus country shows. So it's a China versus Brazil show. And originally this was set to be a 7v7 event, but some things changed around and now it is a 5 versus 5 event. Unfortunately, one of the fights they lost was the Wang Zong versus Nayar Maya fight. Apparently Maya could not get a visa in time and wasn't able to make it over to China to make the fight. So that has been postponed. Not sure if they're going to rebook that fight, especially if it's a visa issue, because that could take some time to sort out. So I would assume that Wang Zong is going to want to get rebooked on like the next Chinese MMA show as soon as possible. She is in a big hurry to get as many fights as possible before a hopeful UFC show in China, probably later this year. I have been starting to hear some things about that potential China show, and hopefully I'll be able to be the first to drop that info. But since it is just like, it's coming up quickly, Q3 is nearly over. So we'll probably get some news about that pretty soon. I believe, yeah, just 2 UFC shows left to be announced for the year. So could be Shanghai on one of those events, and Wang Zong definitely wants to get on that. I don't know if she's going to be able to make it since she's only like a 2-0 as a pro, but yeah, she's in the UFC system, so it wouldn't surprise me if they just gave her the fight even as a 2-0 fighter. But honestly, they'll be back to China at least once next year, if not twice. So yeah, there'll be other opportunities if she doesn't make it. But the WLF show, I sometimes have a hard time figuring out who the non-Chinese fighters are, just since their names are not always like printed out in English letters. But I believe the main event is Joe Kun versus Deizuban Souza. I think this is a Muay Thai fight. Albert Cojeda versus Wang Wanli. Ida Regun versus some Brazilian guy that goes by Gabriel. Wu Damu versus Eduardo Ramon. Kalino Catalibieca versus Victor Nunez. And then, so those are the 5 China versus Brazil fights. And then the 2 other main card fights are Li Yunfeng versus Kurban Wubu Kamisu and Zhang Qinghe versus An Yuping, which, as far as I can tell, An Yuping is making his pro debut. That's against Zhang Qinghe. That's really tough. Zhang has probably like 20 fights. So I think it was kind of a last minute fight because his Brazilian opponent fell out. So That will air on WLF's Douyin channel. I'm not sure if I'm going to catch that. I may just try to catch the replay later this weekend, since yeah, it's a rough time for those of us in the U.S. But yeah, WLF. Unfortunate Wang Zong couldn't make it, but hopefully we'll see her again soon. Probably about the time that show ends, you have another show that is beginning. That's One Friday Fights 33. And a lot of times I don't even mention these events because they may or may not feature Asian fighters. But this week's One Friday Fights event, really, really good with some great Asian MMA prospects. And guys, especially two of them that I have touted for a long time. Not as like future champions per se, but just as like, hey, keep an eye on these two guys. One of them is Joon, which he's a Korean teenager, probably. I think he's 17 years old now. He's going to be fighting Pakistan's Ismail Khan, and Khan is 5-0 as well. Perfect fight for both of them at their these stage of their careers, just to see that it's not. I wouldn't call this like a mismatch at all, but like it's definitely a big step up for both guys, potentially just fighting someone outside of their comfort zone, and just should be a good gauge to see where they're at. It might be too early for Cho, but yeah, we'll see. I think that should be a really interesting fight. I admit I don't really know much about Khan, but when you look at Pakistani MMA fighters, he's one of like those 5 guys right now that's like, okay, you've got a undefeated record, you're pretty young, and probably just like going to get bigger opportunities from here. So that's both those guys in one championship. And then the other fight that I'm also excited about is to see Rabindra Dhant, the fighter from Nepal, who is also 5-0, fighting a Russian guy, Toropchi Dongak. And I think this is a perfect fight from one championship for this One Friday Fights card. See where Rabindra Dhant is at. Toropchi has already had one fight with one championship. In fact, it's just 1-0. But that first fight, eventually the corner threw in the towel, I believe from ground and pound. So I think it's great that he's fighting just a 1-0 guy. Dhant fighting in Nepal and in the smaller shows in India, like I think he's quickly outgrown that level, and so now he's, I think, on a slightly higher level. I think this is a great opportunity. His grappling is probably going to be tested. Honestly, where he comes from, Lock and Roll MMA, those guys have some pretty good grappling there. So I'd be very interested to see this go to the ground. I don't know enough about Dongak, and both guys are so young in their careers that it's really hard to like predict this fight. It always is when you have like prospects that fight on the regional scene at lower levels of competition. It just gets really hard to accurately assess exactly where their skills are at. So excited for that fight as well. That goes down from Bangkok's Lumpini Stadium at 5:30 a.m. Eastern, 5:30 a.m. Pacific, 8:30 a.m. Pacific on YouTube channel. By now, you probably know where to find them. Some odds and ends from Saturday. AFC 28 is on Saturday. That's the Korean promotion Angels Fighting Championship. They've been alternating shows in Vietnam and South Korea, so this is one of their Vietnam shows. Honestly, not a lot of like Vietnamese talent on there, but there's oddly enough a lot more Brazilian guys on this show than Vietnamese guys. I think all these Brazilian guys actually live and train in Vietnam, which is why they're on the show. But some good stuff on there. You got Song Young Jae, who is their bantamweight champion, AFC bantamweight champion. He's coming back for the first time since 2019. But yeah, should be fun. I think there's 2 Vietnamese guys on the card. Also tomorrow morning, or Saturday morning, Bullet Fly FC 20. On that card, you've got Ding Miao fighting Zhang Miao. It's interesting. Ding Miao just kind of switches off between like fighters that are like way better than her, and then like like squash matches. So I think this is one of those squash match fights. But a lot of other guys making their pro debuts on Bulletfly FC. I think that's like you have to pay to watch that. But yeah, I'll get those results up on Tapology. Zeus FC 6 in Korea apparently has an event. I haven't been able to find that fight card anywhere, but as far as I can tell, that event is still happening. Muradov Professional League 8 going down from Tashkent, Uzbekistan. That's on UFC Fight Pass on Saturday as well. Let's see, what else is, we got anything else on Saturday? Nothing else that I can tell going down this Saturday. But what I really want to talk about is this Deep versus Black Combat show. So as you may know, these two promotions, Deep in Japan, Black Combat in South Korea, they kind of had this little rivalry. Back in February, they hosted their first co-promoted show in South Korea. And that was a 5 versus 5 fight event. And ultimately, Black Combat got the better of those fights, won 3-2. Of course, the other end of the deal is that Deep would be able to host them in Japan later this year. So that event goes down this Monday, early in the hours of in the US, but yeah, it goes down from Japan, I believe Tokyo. And I want to run through those fights, especially the Korea versus Japan fights, and sort of see if we can figure out how this is going to go, who might get the better hand here. I'm honestly really torn. There's some fights that I think I'm pretty confident are going to go one way. Then there's like 3 or so fights that I really don't know how they're going to go. So just to go down those fights, I believe the main event is Ryo Sakai versus Young Hae Joon at either open weight or heavyweight. And I can't tell if that is a title fight or not. I've heard mixed on that, but that is the main event. And also there's 3 title fights on this card. The atomweight title fight, Saori Oshima against Park Se-yoon. That should be a good fight. Looking forward to that. At the lightweight division for the title fight is Juri Ohara against Lee Song-ha. The bantamweight title fight is Koichi Ishizuka against Yu Soo-young. And then the other 3 fights, Shingo Suzuki against Choi Jun-seo, Jin Aoi versus Shin Sung-min, and rounding it out, Takahiro Komekine against Kim Sung-woon. So I want to briefly just go through these. Of course, I'm not going to take up the whole show, but just want to briefly touch on these and give a little bit of a prediction how they might go. So the ones that I'm most confident about, I would say I feel pretty confident in Saori Oshima beating Park Se-yoon. Park, yeah, she's on a 3-fight win streak. She just won the Black Combat Atomweight Championship, but I think Saori Oshima is a couple levels ahead of her, and especially going down to Japan, I think that we're probably going to see her win this, potentially win by submission. Usually Oshima fights at microweight, which is like 95, somewhere in the 95-pound region, moving up to atomweight for this, and going to be fighting Park Se-yoon, who once fought as heavy as flyweight. So could be a little bit of a size advantage for Park, which makes the fight a little bit interesting, but I think Oshima is going to be able to take this probably in the grappling department. I also feel pretty confident Juri Ohara over Lee Song-ha. That seems a little bit like a pretty big experience gap. Ohara is pretty good. He's on a roll. I think he's going to beat Lee Song-ha. I feel sort of confident about Yu Soo-young beating Koichi Ishizuka. I think, yeah, Yu Soo-young just much hotter fighter right now. Really good grappling, BJJ black belt. Got two belts, one in Black Combat, one in NISA FC. I feel like he's probably gonna take this. And then I feel pretty confident in Choi Jun-seo beating Shingo Suzuki. Choi is one of the best prospects in all of Korea right now, tearing through Black Combat, it's middleweight division. So I think those are the ones I feel pretty confident about. The ones I feel less confident about, but I'm still going to also give you a little bit of a pick. Takahiro Komekine against Kim Sung-woon. I'm going to lean Takahiro here. As I looked at these two guys, Kim Sung-woon, yeah, a little bit this was one of the harder ones for me to pick, but I'm going to lean Takahiro mostly on experience here. And let me just show you this card. I meant to do that earlier. Let me just put this on the screen here. All right, so there you see this fight card. And all right, there you have it. Yeah, Juri Ohara, you see, he's got like 50 fights more than Lee Song Ha. Kind of a weird matchup to me. But the one I was covering here is Takahiro Komekine against Kim Sung-woon. Yeah, this one is hard to pick. Takahiro, this is at flyweight. I feel like Takahiro, probably the more well-rounded fighter, way more experienced. Going down to Japan, I feel like I can probably feel safe and leaning towards him in this fight. Another one that I struggled with, went back and forth a lot, was this Jean Aoi fight against Shung Sun Min. I'm gonna lean towards Jean Aoi in this fight. Just want to show you his page really quick. 26 years old, 2-fight win streak. Last fight was a flying knee KO over Daisuke Nakamura. Yeah, overall, he's, I think, just way more experienced, has fought much better competition than Shin. Shin's got some heavy hands, but I'm going to lean towards Jin Aoi here. And then the last fight is the main event, Ryo Sakai versus Young Hae Joon. I mean, how do you pick this fight? It's two heavyweights that are 35, 36 years old. Both guys, a lot of losses, a lot of wins, and really both of them either finish or get finished in every single fight. Both guys won a couple, or have won their last couple fights. Ultimately, I'm going to lean towards Young in this fight. He's got the better ground game. He's got pretty good judo, really likes to work from the scarfold position. And so I feel like of the two, he has more options to win this fight. But it's heavyweight, and I have no idea. I mean, either guy could win the fight with a punch. So that one is really hard to pick too, but I'm going to lean towards Young Hae Joon. So for me, of that tally, I believe that puts us at 4 for Japan, 3 for Korea. Let's see how these predictions go, and looking forward to watching this event. But okay, so that's Black Combat versus Deep. Just one other quick one. URCC 88 was a postponed show. It was supposed to go down at the beginning of September, got postponed towards this Tuesday in Manila. The only thing that is interesting for me about this event is that it features the return of Carls Johns de Thomas to URCC. If you recognize that name, it's because Carls John de Thomas used to fight for the UFC years ago, and then he went 0-2, and then he took 5 years off, totally dropped off the map, and then came back last year and won 2 fights in the Philippines on 2 pretty smaller shows. But URCC is where he came up through the ranks, and so he's back there. So interested to see what happens there. He's in the main event. I believe he's against a guy named Bernard Soriano. But yeah, this URCC event, I believe it's all MMA fight. No, I take that back. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 bare knuckle fights, but yeah, a couple amateur fights. Slowly, these URCC shows are improving in quality. So I've got my eye on them. Definitely got my eye on Johns de Thomas to see if he can kind of reemerge as a Filipino prospect. But okay, a couple Asian MMA news. I touched on UFC Shanghai. I've heard some stuff going around for that. None of it is very like solid, so I probably won't like mention it just yet. But the other thing is I saw this week that on a live Q&A that Chatri Sitchodong did, someone asked about Kim So-yeol, and I've done some talking to some folks, and this is a really interesting situation. I think there's a good chance that we lose Kim So-yeol from the UFC. I'm from what I understand, and I'm not going to go into the whole drama. It's a lot of drama, guys. But the UFC was incorrectly informed that she was a free agent, and which is it's a little bit strange to me that they fell for that, because they shouldn't and I've seen these contracts before too. When I was a manager, I had a fighter fight for One Friday Fights, but so Kim So-yeol fights for One Championship, One Friday Fights in August, and then in September signs with the UFC. Well, what's the problem there is that for most fighters, there's a matching period where if maybe you're a free agent, maybe you're not contractually obligated by like a 3-fight deal, another promotion gives you an offer. One champion, you are obligated by contract to send that offer to One Championship, and they have the opportunity to match that offer or exceed it. And the UFC was incorrectly informed that Kim was a free agent, and so they basically just forgot about the matching period. So One Championship, not happy about that. And I heard, yeah, things could get a little bit messy, a lot of drama, some things that are really frustrating, but I'm not sure. I would say it's more unlikely than likely that we see Kim So-yeol in the UFC fighting Eduarda Moira on November 4th. And I actually heard that a lot of folks were upset with the post that I made about this, and which is just really funny to me that they're upset that I posted about it, because I didn't even break the news. There was literally zero reporting going on. First, Eduarda Moira posted the fight on her Instagram, and then Marcel, because she did that, posted the fight on his social media, and so then I did. I literally did nothing, but maybe just a little bit different of an audience than those other two. But yeah, so don't shoot the messenger, guys. But we'll see what happens with that situation. It's going to be messy. Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's too bad. It's too bad for Kim. I feel like it's not really her fault, but what can you do? So that's that. So let's hop into your questions. Alrighty. All right. Yeah. So excited for Deep versus Black Combat again. I know. Good stuff. I think these are the perfect situations of co-promotion. Perfect way to co-promote. Two promotions that are kind of based in neighboring countries. A little bit of rivalry already existing between the two countries. Two rosters that kind of match up well. Yeah, it's perfect. I love it too. As far as I know, because I was wondering how do we watch this show? It looks like you'll be able to watch it on Deep's YouTube channel. Of course, this is if you're probably outside of Japan, but for $15 a month, you subscribe, you pay for their membership to their YouTube channel. You get all the Deep Jewels shows, you get all the Deep shows. So if you want to watch it, I believe it will be on that live. And the timing, I believe, last I checked, that starts at 5:30 a.m. Eastern, 2:30 a.m. Pacific. Sorry, excuse me, on Monday the 18th. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's the main card or because there's other Deep fights. It's also like Deep 115. So I'm not sure what exactly starts at that time, but yeah. Thank you, Jimmy, for posting those rules for the chat. James asking, why do Rising Heads like the ring? The whole point of the boundary is to contain the action, and the ring does a poor job of that. That's why I like the Rising Landmark, because it's in a cage. defending the ring for MMA is a very weird hill to fight on, if that's the saying. I think like I've covered this briefly before. I would be interested to look into some statistics on this. If like how much do fights in a ring versus a cage generally spend more time on the mat versus standing? I think we could all confidently answer that they spend less time in the clinch up against the cage. So personally, I don't love having two different types of, like you said, containers, fields to compete on, because it changes the strategy and the tactics so much of MMA. And then it's almost like you start getting into these weird things where it's like, hey, we have this Muay Thai guy. There's Muay Thai's in a ring. But, you know, it's like we have this guy that's a really good wrestler, wasn't really able to use his wrestling up against the cage. So it's like, I don't know, things just get a little bit weird for me. I think why people like the ring, one, it's a nostalgia thing. Two, it's similar to boxing, so it feels familiar in that way. Three, probably, well, also because it's similar to kickboxing and Muay Thai. Some people would make the argument that there's less like wall install action, but I personally, I get really frustrated and annoyed in the ring when the ref has to like literally drag them back to the center of the cage, or when there's like, oh, what was that show really recently? Oh, it was last week's One Friday Fight show where a guy finished a guillotine, like they're hanging over the ropes of the ring, and I'm just like, one, that like messes up your ability to defend it if you've literally got like ropes going in between your bodies, and then you're like wondering, like, I know if I was in that position, I would be like, is the ref about to like pause us and move us? It's just a really awkward situation that might not allow both fighters to fight to their fullest ability. So I don't think the ring is good for grappling at all. What I wish that Ryzen would do is do the like ring with mesh at the bottom, or I don't know if it's mesh or like a cage, but I've seen it like, I think WKG does it. I've seen some shows in China do it where it's like a half ring, half, like the top half is a ring, the bottom half is a cage, so that it blocks the grappling. And then, but still, whatever advantages would be afforded in the stand-up striking by a ring, it still gives you that. I don't know. I could also see like, it could be awkward. Like, I feel like I would trip over that if I was like grappling up against the ring. I feel like I would trip over that wall. So I don't know what the best solution is. It's also probably a better viewing experience, especially if you're live. The ring, I will admit that is one of MMA's biggest detractions from being a live sporting experience, is that the cage really gets in the way. So it may be a much better experience attending live if it's in a ring. That's just the devil's advocate arguments that I hear. Personally, I still prefer the cage, but yeah, I don't know if there's a solution, honestly. Yeah, thanks Makoto. Also, thank you for those rules. Rio, what do you think of Mackenzie Dern teaming up with Henry Cejudo? Oh, love it. Seems like a strange team up since Cejudo only trains people with a good work ethic. And hearing stories from the Fight Lab and RBCA, Dern's work ethic is less to be desired. Well, maybe it's a good place to tune that up, no? And what has always been the biggest criticism of Mackenzie Dern is wrestling. Amazing lights out grappler, but what good is grappling if you can't even get the fight to the mat? She's often had trouble with wrestling, and few better gyms to tune up your wrestling than Fight Ready working with Henry Cejudo. So that's why I really like that move for her, is being able to do that. Also, just like I heard that RBCA gym closed, maybe. So there's that. Maybe that's why she moved. I don't know what Jason Carrillo is up to, if he's going to start a new gym or what. what's going on there. I haven't heard about that, but maybe that's why she moved. But I think it'll be good for her to get another look, a different kind of coach in Eddie Cha. So with her striking, so I think it'll be good. I don't know if I can comment on the work ethic side of things. She's never seemed. I mean, it seems like she has gotten more and more physical in every single UFC fight. So I don't know. I can't really comment on that, but Cejudo's going to push her hard. So hopefully it could also fix that if that's an issue as well. But yeah, sucks we don't get to see Wang Zong. I agree. Huang Ming, Strickland kept crying that Adesanya selling out to China is an insult. Is being from China an insult? No, it's not. I am from China and proud of where I come from. Should I be ashamed of my own heritage? No, you should not. I thought it was very sweet of Adesanya to show love to his Sifu, which means his teacher. Really hurt me when Strickland made fun of it. Well, you got to keep in mind who that's coming from. Keep in mind that's coming from Sean Strickland. So Sean Strickland is maybe the most polarizing figure and most offensive fighter in the whole UFC. So I would not take that personally. And Sean Strickland has something mean to say about just about everybody. So yeah, don't pay him any mind. What I did some brief, because yeah, someone asked Luke Thomas about that today, about the Izzy China thing. And I was like, yeah, what's going on with that? Because I knew he had competed in China in kickboxing before, but I was like, yeah, what's the deal here? And as far as I know, there's no story here, guys. There's no story. Izzy fought in China, and sometimes he would walk out with the Chinese flag. As far as I know, why he did that is just because he spent time in China, I think lived there for a little bit, and really loved and cherished his time there. And I read an article or watched a video today where he was just like really complimentary of his time in China and the Chinese culture. So I was like, yeah, there's no story here. What gets, I think where people get really weird is, have you noticed, especially, this year, have you noticed how much weird controversy there has been over like flags and country representation, especially with Israel Adesanya? It's gotten so weird. You've got all the Dracus du Plessis stuff being like, is he a real African? You've got the Adesanya stuff, like born in Nigeria but grew up in New Zealand. It's like, who are you really representing? Honestly, I don't really care about a lot of that stuff. I realize that those arguments have a lot more weight for people in other countries. So if that's important to you, don't hear me say that shouldn't be important. But I think a lot of times there's just like, I'm like, what's really the story here? Does this really matter? And it's like, I think the question was like, is Israel Adesanya saying that he is Chinese because he's walking out the Chinese flag? And people get just really weird about that. And I think him doing that was kind of just like showing some hey, I really love China. I've loved my time here. You all are great, which there's no story there. So things get weird when you enter into those conversations. It gets really gray, but I don't feel like there's anything to be bent out of shape over. So yeah, that's my take on it. If Israel Adesanya loved his time in China, hey man, I agree. Like, I've spent time in China. I loved my time there. I have like pretty much nothing but good to say about the folks that I interacted with. So I'm like, yeah, man, I feel you. It was a great experience for me too. So yeah, don't think he meant to disrespect China. He's more talking about Israel disrespecting his own country by representing another. Yeah, that's where it just gets weird. Like when it's like, okay, like, can you represent multiple countries? I think that's a weird thing too. it gets weird and gray. So that's I think where it came from. Dan Hardy said on his breakdown show that he doesn't care about a fighter's win-loss record. Interesting. Says that a fighter's current skill level is only indicative of their current skill level. Agree. That is technically true. That is technically true, because you do see fighters that maybe lost 8 of their 9 first fights, and then they go on a 10-fight win streak. It's really weird, and some of that might have been due to really bad matchmaking early in their career. You see that, like look at a lot of these Japanese fighters that have these like really uneven or almost even records that are really good fighters, but it's because they're fighting fighters with like 20 more fights than them in their second pro fight. Really weird stuff, and then they're getting this loss, and then it makes the record look really weird. So I do technically agree with that, but the optics do matter. I think the optics do matter. Now, when you're someone like Anthony Smith, think about Anthony Smith. He's got like, what's his record? Something like 30-some wins, 18-some losses. He's got a lot of losses, but Anthony Smith is a guy that's going to fight in the UFC. Maybe even if he alternates wins and losses, goes on losing streaks, he's going to fight there until the day he's done, because we know how good he is, and we know his fights are pretty much always really exciting. And you can put him in any main event against any other light heavyweight. It's going to be a great fight. So for certain guys that have proven themselves, the optics don't really matter. Again, Nick Diaz doesn't really matter. But I think the optics do give people pause. Like on Dana White's Contender Series, you'll have a guy that has kind of a wonky record like that. And like, yeah, Dana might make some comments about like, yeah, when I saw his record, didn't look great, but then I saw how he fought. So the optics do matter, but I think when it comes down to actual matchmakers signing fighters, they know they can evaluate someone's skill. They can see what their current level is and what their current win streak is. So yeah, that's an interesting question though. I do agree with Dan Hardy, but sometimes those optics come into play. Sammy, yeah, pound for pound was invented to discuss skill regardless of weight. It's not about accomplishments. Why do people not know the history of what pound for pound actually means? Well, I mean, show me the central definition of pound for pound. Where is there a dictionary definition of pound for pound? Because there seems to be like 3 or 4 definitions out there that people measure by. And like it came back into contention this week when like Sean Strickland shot up to like number 8 on the UFC pound for pound rankings, and people had a big problem with that. Some people are like, basically UFC pound for pound rankings are just ranking their current champions plus a couple former champions, and yeah, it's hard for me to like come out strong with pound for pound, because in my heart, I agree with you that it is literal just matching up skills, but like, how can you actually completely do that when fighters are in different weight classes? The only way you can do that is by having top fighters fight each other, and then top fighters from different weight classes. Like the biggest tell is fighters from different weight classes fighting each other. But even then, like the Volkanovski Makhachev thing, Makhachev has the advantage because it's at lightweight. So it's almost like you're not totally matching up skill to skill, because in that kind of fight, because one guy still has a size advantage. So pound for pound is always such a weird conversation. And yeah, it's like with Sean Strickland, does he deserve to be ranked ahead of Adesanya? Well, it's like, well, he did just beat him, but Adesanya has a better resume, a better track record against top level competition. He's also gone up to light heavyweight once. Didn't go well, but he at least went the full 5 rounds with a much bigger guy. So I agree that it should be a raw skill per skill evaluation. I just don't know the best way to literally judge that. and that's where it all kind of breaks down for me, which is why personally I'm not always the first guy to be interested in these like champion versus champion matchups, unless it's something that is like we've got number one versus number two, or it's kind of like the top three guys, or it's like a GSP versus Anderson Silva. Like these guys have been at the top for a long time, and they are just one weight class away from each other. That was one pound for pound fight I wish we could have gotten, but yeah, it's such a. Sorry, I'm not really answering your question. It's like, yeah, I agree with you, but I don't know how to really like fix the pound for pound debate at the same time. Yeah, Jamie, what do you think about publications taking quotes from interviews that they didn't do themselves, then making an article of it? That is totally fine as long as you cite the original source. If you can, link to it. That's journalism and media 101. That is in one sense how you separate the sheep from the goats from high quality sports media, is if they cite other publications. Also, if they cite respectable publications. If it's just a quote from an interview, like, yeah, you should always cite that. So I used to, I've hardly talked about this, but I used to work for Sportskeeda, and literally my only job for them was they would take article or like video interviews from other sites. They would take video interviews from like a James Lynch or an Ariel Helwani show, or like different interviews that had been done, and then they would take a couple of those quotes and then just make an article out of them. And I had my own kind of wrestlings with that style of things, but I didn't have a problem with like the overall idea of just taking a quote, because we would always cite it. Like we would always cite it. We would always link the original video. That's totally fine, and that's something that's a normal thing. I mean, imagine if Aaron Bronstetter does an interview with Dana White, and Dana White like breaks some big news about a big title fight or something. Like, people are going to share that around, and as long as they say like, yeah, Dana White interview with Aaron Bronstetter, if they can link it. I say if they can because like on Instagram, like something like Instagram, or like if I'm talking about it on a YouTube video, it's a little bit harder to link, but yeah, I don't have a problem with that. They have to cite it though. Otherwise, you're basically just like plagiarizing and stealing someone's work, which sucks. And by now, if I ever break news, it's a given that it's gonna happen, that people are gonna steal your stuff without quoting it. Usually that's just among like smaller like Instagram accounts, which I don't really care, but yeah, it's just something that happens in the sport, unfortunately. Why does Dana White have such a big and dedicated fan base that will defend him? Aren't we supposed to support the fighters, not the organization? It is really interesting, and people have brought this up before, but like, is there any other sports league where the head of that sports league is like insanely popular? There really isn't. Like every other sports league I can think of where the commissioner walks into the arena, gets booed profusely. And Dana White I think it's because and I'm not trying to make a political statement one way or the other here, but like, think about the Donald Trump effect. People loved Donald Trump and still love him because they perceive him as someone who speaks his mind and he doesn't try to play the PC game. And whatever your opinions on that are, for some reason, a lot of people really like that. A lot of people love a figure that speaks their mind, that doesn't filter themselves, sometimes says things that are a little bit insensitive, but and people love a figure that feels relatable, which I'm like, Dana White is like a multimillionaire, and I'm like, he lives in a mansion, like has houses all around the like he's not a relatable guy, but it's kind of the effect of like someone you would like to share a drink with, and politicians are always trying to tap into that and create that persona, because if they can come off that way, if they can come off as this sort of like blue collar everyman, then they win the match, they win the people. And so I think people like that. And you know, Dana White will get on Instagram and do live Q&As. He hops on his Instagram and makes live fight announcements. And I think, and this is something I would say as a positive of Dana White, is that you can sense Dana White's passion for the sport. Whether or not you agree with the decisions that he's made as a leader, you can't deny that he has an enormous passion for the sport. He is not up there to deliver dry press conferences and just spout out facts. He is passionate about the sport of MMA, and passion is contagious. It's like you can be passionate about anything, and eventually like you will get people to listen to you if you're passionate about whatever you're talking about. So I think that's where Dana White draws people in, is he is pumped about MMA. He loves MMA. He's been promoting it ever since the early 2000s, and it still seems like he's living his best life. So I think that is one big reason why people love him, to be honest. And that's honestly one thing I do really appreciate about him, is that it seems like he is a big fan of the sport as well. And because of that, like, he, at least to an extent, I would say not to his fullest extent, but in a lot of extent, he's trying to make the fights that the fans want to see, because he's a fan himself. Yeah. So I think that's how I'd answer that. Obligatory Zhang Weili question. I was starting to get worried. I was like, we're 10 questions in and no Zhang Weili questions. Did you see Chael say 288-21 was more competitive than the stats say? What's his agenda? Get people to hate Weili, like in 2021 when Rose said Red Dead stuff. I thought we would be past that, but for him to say things to get fans to turn on Weili seems really bad. 288-21. I'm not totally sure what you mean by that. If you could elaborate, Rio, I'll hit your question. I'll hit your question later. 288-21. Talking about UFC 288. Yeah, I will just say Chael Sonnen has some weird takes on Zhang Weili that I don't agree with. He wants Zhang Weili to carry herself like he carries himself, and that's just not happening. That's just not happening, guys. Chael Sonnen is a different breed, for sure. Yeah, he actually lives around here. There's a guy that works at my wife, or not works at. There's a regular at my wife's coffee shop that's like best friends with him, and like hangs out with them. So we'll talk about Chael whenever I see him. It's really interesting. Why do people choose to accept and believe Amanda Nunes excuses like she got sick after the Pena fight? She has those are probably her fans. I'm not sure what to make of that. I haven't heard that from her. I don't know. I do know, like, no fighter enters a fight at 100% health. So I don't know. Talking about the different reasons why you might have lost a fight afterwards, that can get a little bit weird to me. And you have to be really careful with that, because then you start getting into like, yeah, the excuses game, diminishing your opponent's performance game. Even if you know, like, even if you truly believe, like, yeah, the reason I did that was because I felt sick. Was it she was supposed to fight Shevchenko and she was sick and actually had to drop out of that fight the day of. So I don't know if she's just someone that gets sick a lot. I don't know. I can't answer that because I don't know what the truth is. Mario, yeah. Hey, are you going to cover one championship? I do. I saw in an interview with Chaudhry, they said one is the biggest show in Asia because they have over 4.5 million viewers. That's amazing, right? That was on a Q&A with Chaudhry. Yeah, I mean, first question, yeah, I do cover one championship, and I really enjoy, like, whenever I'm watching their stuff, I really enjoy it. They have a penchant for putting on really fun fights, and yeah, obviously a lot of fighters that I'm really interested in. Tomorrow morning, I don't always get up for the One Friday Fight shows, but tomorrow morning I'm definitely going to get up for that show because three of those guys, yeah, Ismail Khan, Joon, and Rabindra Dhant, three prospects that I just like. I have to watch all three of those guys representing three totally different styles from Korea, Pakistan, and Nepal. So excited about that. Excited that they are bringing in like some interesting prospects from Asia. One championship, you know, I could talk about this for an hour, and I often have on previous shows, just kind of where they're at right now, their different strategies. Really interesting. Kind of seems like they're at a crossroads a little bit. They're making a lot of really big transitions. Some of it, I'll be honest, like leave me behind a little bit. I think I think it is a good move for them to make the transition to more like Muay Thai kickboxing stuff, just because I think that's an undertapped market, and folks just are eating up all those 4-ounce Muay Thai shows. So I get that. The grappling, I'm not as huge of a fan of. I wish that they would just have a separate grappling series for that. But yeah, one is interesting. I have mixed reactions to like the numbers. Understand, and this is not targeted at one championship. Literally every single promoter does this. PFL does this. UFC does this. The numbers games can be really, really interesting. When promoters put viewership numbers out there, I'm not saying you should immediately distrust them, but sometimes it's like the immediate questions need to be asked. Where are you sourcing this from? What was the competition that you were up against? And sometimes those numbers are used selectively within certain contexts as basically a PR stunt. Because these promoters, what they're trying to do, like the big way that these promoters make money is off of ads and sponsorships. And what they're doing when they put those numbers out there is that they are saying they're making sales pitches to sponsors. They're not talking to us, the fans, when they're doing it. They're talking directly to potential sponsors and advertisers. So those numbers, like, yeah, I don't, especially in Thailand, I don't doubt that one championship does gangbusters numbers in Thailand. Some of the other stuff is like, I don't really know how to verify like viewership numbers. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. Like, I mean, if you're saying all of Asia and the US and YouTube and all that stuff, like, but yeah, I always take those numbers. And again, I'm not shooting one championship here. UFC, PFL, because UFC can be like, you look at UFC's numbers on Spike TV, 10 years ago or however long, I don't remember. I guess it was more than 10 years ago. They're on Fox 10 years ago. But yeah, it's like they would do 10 million viewers on a Spike show. And now it's like 1 million viewers on ESPN is really good. Because it's all about context and who they're competing against. Also the changing TV market with cord cutting. So, I mean, sure, great. Like, but I have reservations. There have been times, both with UFC, PFL, and one championship, where they will report a number, a statistic, and then I hear the truth about that statistic. Like, we sold out this arena. Well, you actually only sold 1,000 tickets, and then you sold a couple thousand, like, or you gave away a bunch of comp tickets, you know? So like some statistics, especially when they're self-reported, can get a little bit weird. I know one championship will cite Nielsen, but I take it with a grain of salt is all I would say. What are your thoughts on the Manel cop saying, oh gosh, saying the F word that everyone hates and getting into a tussle with Adesanya? I really like to watch Kyoji Horiguchi dominate Cop when Cop is fighting. Yeah, it sucks, right? Like we had 2 fighters last weekend use that word on the broadcast. First it was Charles Radke and then Manel Cop. So weird because that like never happens. Of course, we're talking about the gay slur, not the 4-letter F word, but yeah, it sucks. It sucks that like that the UFC doesn't hold themselves to the same standard as other sporting entities. And Dana White's like response to that was like, well, they apologized, which I mean, yeah, that's way better than not apologizing, but I also don't really like the apology doesn't redeem my image of those guys at all for using that word, because no one else, like how many people do you know, maybe you do, but like how many people do you know that just like normally use that word? Like no, but like I don't hear that word used. The only reason that they use that word on the broadcast is because they use it in their normal life, which is a big problem because like that's a word you don't use. And like I totally don't buy the like, well, it was the heat of the moment. I'm like, okay, if I'm in the heat of the moment, I don't use that word. Y'all probably don't use that word. I don't care how intense the moment is. Like the heat of the moment is going to could lower your guard, not make you into a different person. So yeah, I mean, an apology is better than none, but like, yeah, that totally is like unacceptable and really dumb. Yeah, Cop lost some points for me for sure. Especially Charles Radke fighting like that. I don't know if he was injured or what, but like fighting a really like bad fight like that, and then like that post-fight interview, like, man, get out of here. Like that's a situation where I'm like, just cut this dude. Like he doesn't belong to be here. But you know the UFC, they're not going to do that. But yeah, pretty frustrating for Cop. I think it was Aaron Bronstetter that posted something like, yeah, there's like it's like against the law to make that kind of comment publicly. So I feel like justice would be some kind of financial fine from the New South Wales government. That would feel like justice for me if the government enforced some kind of, I know free speech, but like, that's just how I feel about it. I'm sure people will disagree, but will Wong Tong make it to the UFC one day? I see her highlights. She's very good at kickboxing. Everything I can tell, she should be in the UFC. It's hard to tell because her last 2 opponents were pretty low level. So yeah, how can you really truly evaluate someone's talent? But she also like beat the brakes off of those 2 opponents. She looked like she was 17 levels above them. So yeah, I do think that we'll see her in the UFC. I do think it'll be sooner rather than later. I think that she'll only need to get one, maybe even just one more win, but it's rare that you see the UFC sign a 3-0 fighter. But yeah, I do think we will. If not at the next China event, probably the one after that, for sure. Makoto, sorry, man. Asking if I watched the K1 card for fun last weekend. No, I did hear that it was a good fight. You know what? I'm going to write that down right now to check that out, because I meant to check that out, but I didn't get around to it. But I will definitely make note of that. Anyone else have like profusive lists for everything that you do? I have to like make lists for everything. Even if someone like tells me something, I'll be like, I got my phone, write it real quick. So yeah, what do I think of one's grappling? Some really good, while others is really bad, like the RDR match. Yeah, I wish that they would make it a separate series where they can give it the platform it really deserves. Grappling in a cage is not great. I'll be honest, like a cage is not the best place to watch grappling. Absolutely. It should either be, at the very least, it should be in a ring. At the most, it should be on just like an elevated platform, like most of the other pure grappling organizations. I wish that like if one was doing, say they're doing like one of their Amazon Prime shows, what I would love is like maybe that, or maybe later that, I guess the Amazon Prime shows go down in the morning, but if they're doing like a Friday fight show, I don't know. I wish just like that same day that they would just have like a separate event, maybe in the same venue, maybe in like a nearby venue, but that they would just be able to give it. Because I feel like, I don't know if you all watch grappling, like sport grappling, in any other context, but it can be really cool. You have these small crowds of like a couple hundred people. It's really intimate. It's just like, I just feel like a big arena with a cage is that's just not the place to do grappling. If you put those exact same fights they've had in a better environment, I think it could be way cooler. I just don't feel like we need to cram every kind of martial art into one event. No pun intended there. But yeah, just like have a separate show the same day in a smaller venue. And I would like actually probably tune into that. I really would. But yeah, and then another thing I wish they would do is I wish that they would change something up for the championship fights. It's just like, it's like they know that like it's already a big ask to go from like 4-ounce Muay Thai and MMA to grappling. So they're like, okay, we'll make all these fights no longer than 10 minutes. We'll make them as short as we can, so they don't take up too much of your time. But it's like the championship fights are the exact same as the regular ones, just 10 minutes. And I just feel like they deserve a little bit more. I don't know, just add 2 more minutes to them. These guys are used to grappling for longer than that if they're elite grapplers. So yeah, that's another thing where it's like, if you put it in its own environment, then I feel like it would be a little bit more shameless to have longer fights or, yeah, I don't, that's the thing with one championship is I'm just like banking on the fact that every one of your viewers is a fan of every combat sports is a really tall task. And I think a pretty gross assumption and could be alienating for a lot of, like if you're converting viewers, if you're converting pure MMA viewers to striking viewers, making them fans of that, I feel like that might be equivalent to the fans that you might be alienating for the same reason. So I don't know. I wish they'd just separate them. That's how I feel. Do you think that Zhang Wei Li will fight on that Shanghai card you mentioned at the end of the year? Any updates on her next fight? She's been quite quiet for a champion. Well, she did just fight like a couple weeks ago. I don't know. I've heard different things, and I almost hesitate to say them because they're like so secondhand. But don't be surprised if someone else is in the main event of that China show. I would say they're probably not going to. It seems like if Zhang Wei Li is not ready for that China show, it seems like December is going to be the month for that. If Zhang Wei Li is not ready for that show, I don't know if they're going to wait up for her, which is a little bit unfortunate because if it was like, yeah, just wait another month or two, I'm like, just do it. Like Zhang versus Yan would be so cool to do in China. Which who knows? Maybe they'll do Shanghai in December, then they'll go to Beijing in like February or March. Somewhere that's far away, or go back to Guangzhou, somewhere far away where you don't have as much like you're not going to Shanghai twice. You could go to China every other month. You could almost go to China every month if you wanted to. I think all these cities with over 1 million people, you could do that easy. But I don't know. I heard that it could be a question of if she's healthy enough. So I don't know. She fought in April and then in August. So that's 3 times in 1 year is a lot for a champion. Most champions only defend their belt twice in 1 year, or fight for a title twice in 1 year. So it's cutting it close. I'll say that. I don't know. I'm talking to people about it now, so hopefully I'll have an update on that. Rio, do you think Cejudo will show the secret to beating Zhang Weili to Mackenzie Dern? I don't think Henry Cejudo has all the answers to beat. Zhang Weili travels around. By now she's added so much to her game since training, and she was only with him for 1 training camp, so it wasn't that long. I don't think Henry Cejudo is going to be able to give the keys. Even if he knows how to beat her, can Mackenzie Dern pull that off? That's another question. It's a big ask. There's a big difference in physicality between those 2 fighters. So I don't think so. Used to watch Adesanya in China during his kickboxing days. He was really good. Loved him and still love him even right now. Maybe my opinion is wrong. No, I think you're right on with that. Do you think Black Combat being only in person is meant to make it more pristine and private? Yeah, I think that's the direction they want it to go. I also love that they try to make English subs at times. Yeah, I don't know that. That's a good question. Everyone's always asking, are they going to go to live shows? They make those shows these really intimate events. They will usually have like a DJ there and have like these big after parties or before parties. I don't know. But yeah, it'll be like this kind of black tie event. It's its own beast. Black Combat is its own beast. It's its own brand of MMA. And with as like popular as they've become, both their YouTube channel and their in-person events all selling out, like, why change? Unless Netflix is going to throw $100 million your way to have live shows or something. Yeah, they're killing it. They can get bigger by signing better and better talent, but yeah, I don't know that they ever will change. Their show this upcoming Monday is going to be live because it's co-promoted with Deep, who is always broadcast live. So thankful for that. But Gene, yeah, sorry, I typed that Dan Hardy question was wrong. Hardy said that a fighter's current skill level is only indicative of the last 3 fighters. Okay, yeah, I agree with that even more. Last 3 fighters, totally. That's your best indication of what kind of fighter they are. And even that, I did this video on Sora Rachmanova that I released this week. She's a 4-1 fighter, and like 3 fights ago, she was fighting Veronica Borisova and lost that fight by pretty convincing unanimous decision. And like 3 fights later, she's a totally different fighter. So even that, like, even 3 fights, if a fighter's younger, like, can be really hard to make an evaluation for sure. So yeah. Yeah, pound for pound originally created in the 1950s, so boxing writers could talk about how skilled. I think, yeah, pound for pound has to be there in a way, just for us to like everyone wants to know who's actually number 1. So that's why pound for pound is there. Talk about skilled fighters like Sugar Ray Robinson. He would fight a heavyweight who would lose. They want to talk about that. I think in discussing pound for pound, it's not interesting to me, but don't you think that fighters are going to argue about it? And then they should at least know where it comes from. Yeah, I guess, but they may disagree with that 1950s definition of it. So pound for pound is always going to be a conversation that's here. We're always going to disagree about it. There's never going to be a central definition of it. So I feel like it's always going to be as frustrating of a conversation as it is now, unfortunately. Jimmy's saying, yeah, what if a quote is fabricated by the publication? Yeah. Would like to email you an example. Yeah, sure, go ahead. That's again where like you can distinguish like quality media versus amateurs is like taking quotes out of context for sure. How and where do we watch Black Combat? Go to Deep's YouTube channel, and so this is just the event coming up, and it's only here because it's a co-promotion with Deep, but I'm bringing up Deep so I can tell you their YouTube channel, because if you search Deep, it might be hard. Oh gosh, it says Deep, and then there's some Japanese characters. So I don't know Japanese, so I don't know how to do that. But it says their literal name is Deep @Deep4571. So look up that YouTube channel, and then you'll have to like join or something, and then it'll ask you like, do you want to pay $15 a month, or wherever you're from, how much? You pay that monthly fee, and then on Monday you'll be able to watch the live stream of Deep versus Black Combat. Otherwise, you'll just have to go to Black Combat's YouTube channel, which is named Achromatic Film. Here, let me show you. See if we can focus on that. Maybe not. Maybe this is a terrible idea. Anyways, Achromatic, which is one word, film. You just Google or YouTube search Black Combat, you'll find it. But yeah, all their videos are on there. That their whole model is a kind of YouTube documentary style. So they'll have an event, and then in the next like 2 weeks, they'll be putting out the fights one by one, but in this very like documentary style, behind the scenes kind of way. But yeah, if you don't speak Korean, check out the subtitles. Is really your best bet. Just a couple more here. Supporting Dana White thing is like if you like American football and support the NFL rather than the players. That's where my question stems from. Right. You're tapping into a much more deeper question of why don't MMA fans like really truly support the fighter's best interest? Why aren't MMA fans pushing for a fighters union? Why aren't MMA fans pushing for more fighter pay, for the classification of employees, for better benefits, all that stuff? There's always a minority of fans pushing for that. There's a lot of media pushing for that, but the general consensus fans seem to not care about that. I think the Dana White poll, I think because people like Dana White so much, they're more like, if he's asked about that and he's like, what are you talking about? We pay them plenty. Our current structure is the best way to do it, blah, blah, blah. They're more likely to believe him. If you're taking the side of fighters of like everything I just said, then that's going to conflict with the UFC's business. The UFC is going to have to change their business practices, and it's gonna cost them to do that. So in doing that, you're kind of setting yourself up against Dana White. So I think that's where the divide comes from. It's this weird thing. It's like, I don't know if I totally understand it either, but it's like, fans don't always connect the dots between better fighter treatment and a better product for me, a better entertainment product. I think they think that if fighters are treated better, this is such, in my mind, a backwards argument. But I think they think if fighters are treated better, if we start throwing more money at them, if we're cutting down UFC's profits, then that could affect the entertainment product that I receive. I don't know why they make that connection. In my mind, if fighters were healthier, happier, then we're going to get better fights, better athletes, but that connection isn't always made. It's weird. Yeah, that's a deep well there, but yeah. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Rio, 288 to 21. Chael said the fight was more competitive than the stats say. That Lemos had no marks on her. Hey, some fighters just mark up better than others do. We all know that fight was not particularly close. There was one round, what was it, maybe round 4, that I think was pretty much all on the feet. And for Lemos, it's like she lands 21 strikes, but a couple of those strikes are like right on the target, you know? I don't know what Chael's saying. That fight was not close. Lemos had a chance if she could defend the takedowns and land more of those right hands, but we all know, I've talked about it ad nauseum. You all, most of y'all are pretty big Zhang Weili fans, at least from what I can gather previous comments. Like, she's done her research. Yeah, I'm with you all on there. Very strange. Is he trying to get people to hate her like Rose did in 2021? I don't know what his ulterior motives are there. I think Chael is a pretty big Rose fan. I don't think I would doubt that would play into this conversation. I don't know. You all know Chael has some really weird takes. At this point, I've learned not to like let what Chael says get under my skin, just because he has a lot of really weird takes, or he comes from a very specific perspective on MMA, and I don't come from that perspective, which is fine. So we end up having very different perspectives, but yeah, James, exactly. Yeah, why not fine him for using the F word? Like in the UFC code of conduct, I know. I don't understand it, but who's going to keep the UFC accountable? They're not going to lose an audience. Like, I guarantee you that. There is no penalty for the UFC not enforcing this, unfortunately. The penalty might be that New South Wales, Sydney says, hey, y'all can't come back here. Which I feel like the UFC would be like, fine, doesn't matter to us, we'll go somewhere else. Plenty of people that want our business, but yeah, that is honestly where the burden lies, is on these venues, these cities, these governments, to say like, you can't come here because of the track record and because it's unpredictable, like because of this unpredictable product. I feel like that's where the burden lies. So yeah, Makoto, yeah, thanks, great show. Yeah, appreciate your help there. To the moderators, really appreciate your help. We honor your service. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for a great show. Loved not having to get up and change the camera battery. Gosh, that felt good. You don't realize what you have until it's gone. But looking forward to WLF. I haven't made up my mind if I'm going to get up and watch Black Combat. I never get up and watch Japanese MMA, so maybe this is the time I do it. There's a couple of those fighters, the Choi Jun-seos, the Juri Ohara, the Saori Oshima fight, a couple of those that I'm like, yeah, that could be really cool. Maybe I'll shell out $15, but yeah, hopefully I'll have some news for you on UFC's next China event. Working on locking that down. Let's follow the Kim So-ryul story as well. But as for me, appreciate all of you so much. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Really got some fun videos in store for the rest of the year. Check out my newest over Sora Rachmanova, breaking down her last couple fights. But anyways, enjoy the weekend and enjoy the fights, y'all.